and welcome to the Sunday Guardian show by Joyeeta Basu. Today I want to speak of the protests that are taking place in China. Protests primarily against lockdown and Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy. Now the protests have been quite intensive and widespread and have taken place in almost every big city and province, including in Beijing and Shanghai. Now, do you know what these protests are being called? They're being called white paper revolution or A4 revolution, and also blank paper protests, where civilians are holding up a piece of blank paper of A4 size to register their protests against their government and the censorship that is prevalent in China. Now, just keeping quiet, not saying anything is also a form of protest. Now, even drawing a blank square is being regarded as a form of protest. Now, it is all very Gandhian and non-violent, although there have been cases where civilians have fought pitched battles with the police. Now, significantly, these protests have taken place even in the Tsinghua University where Xi Jinping studied. So, what triggered these protests? The anger has been simmering against Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy for quite some time. Now, imagine being treated like animals, locked up inside buildings, with buildings being sealed and boards being used to shutter the entrances if even one case is found in maybe a high rise. Now, then people are being sent to COVID isolation centers that are more like prisons. So the anger was already there, but the immediate trigger was the fire at a multi-storied residential building in Urumqi in Xinjiang province, now which is home to China's Uyghur population. Now, at least 10 people perished in the fire. The fire tenders had a tough time approaching the building because of COVID-related restrictions. All the people who perished were Han Chinese, by the way, not Uyghurs. Now, the Hans are China's main ethnic group, the majority community. Now, this fire triggered a massive uproar on Chinese social media, and inside 2 or 3 days, the protests started on the streets. Now, there was one more trigger to the protests. Guess what? FIFA World Cup football. Now, since the Chinese get to see only what their totalitarian communist rulers want them to see, the common Chinese do not know what is going on in the outside world. But once the live telecasts began and the cameras started showing the galleries overflowing with maskless people, there was shock and depression in China. You see, as a result of which, no wonder simple slogans like "I want to go to the movies" are also being raised, along with slogans like "Give us freedom, give us democracy, we don't want dictatorship, and step down Xi Jinping." Now, interestingly, the pundits, the experts would have us believe that China can never have another pro-democracy protest like that of Tiananmen Square, which ended with the massacre of the students who led the protests in 1989. Now, pundits are saying that the Chinese youth have got prosperity post Tiananmen and they do not have the time for revolution because now they are busy pursuing luxury. In fact, this is what the people of China have been fed. You know, that you don't need democracy because you have prosperity. And see what democracy has brought to places like the West and India. Complete chaos. Now, but what happens when that posh lifestyle gets hit? When your country's economy is in bad shape and maybe you have lost your life savings in the real estate crisis that has hit China, or maybe unemployment is too high, in fact over 18% in China currently. Plus you are imprisoned at home, literally. Now, in such a situation, even the most pampered youth starts to rebel. Social media posts are surfacing where Chinese youngsters are speaking of how wrong they were to criticize Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. They are saying that they did not understand the need for freedom before this. Now, but will these protests lead to another Tiananmen Square-like situation? Well, difficult to say, given the intensity of the crackdown. You see, the police are even entering homes and torturing the people if there is some kind of suspicion that they may have participated in the protests. Cyber tracking is going on and protesters are being locked out of their homes. Now, China has started easing quarantine protocols, but let's see how that goes, because I think ultimately everything will hinge on Xi Jinping's ego. How far A megalomaniac like him will be ready to admit that both his economic policy, where he wants China to return to its socialist moorings, and his COVID policy are hopelessly wrong. Now, the most important thing that the protests have done is they have shown how unpopular she is. In fact, it is ironic that these protests would start just a month after the conclusion of the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, where Xi Jinping was given a third unprecedented term, making him the most powerful General Secretary of the Communist Party after Mao Zedong. Now, that the upper echelons of the Communist Party did not see the protests against Xi coming, it proves how out of touch they are with the ground. You see, the feedback mechanism that is inherent to democracies makes parties and leaders correct course when needed. You see, no party will go to an election with a leader who has become a liability. Unless, of course, it's a dynastic party like in India, the Congress, for example. Now, but these protests are not enough to unseat Xi Jinping because he draws his power from both the party and the military, and he is not looking weak on that front. He has surrounded himself with loyalists, and he and his men are in complete control. So no one opposed to him will dare to touch him, at least at present. But he has also made too many enemies in both the party and the military, who may use these protests to stoke trouble for him over a period of time. You see, the problem is if Xi becomes too desperate, he may try to divert people's attention by launching a kinetic conflict against either Taiwan or India. So we have to be extra careful. But I think we can say that unless and until Xi turns more humane, listens to his people and stops being an autocrat, there's trouble ahead for him and his party. But then a totalitarian system is designed to be exactly the opposite. And then this guy has imperialistic tendencies. He's Emperor Xi, and listening does not come easily to him. Hence, China may be headed for interesting times, and perhaps the world too. Thank you for watching. Until the next time.